Welcome to lesson 12 of Hidden Manna. It's called The Bridegroom. And so we'll go ahead and get into it. We'll talk about the Song of Solomon. We'll examine the bridegroom, and then we'll talk about what is in the bridegroom's heart, from the bridegroom's heart about his bride. And so his perspective of his bride. And so we'll get into this. And so, Song of Solomon, a quick overview. Song of Solomon is a collection of love poems between a man and a woman, celebrating a sexual relationship God intended for marriage. It has also been understood as an illustration of the mutual love of Christ and his church. While it is possible that Solomon from the 10th century BC is the author, many scholars regard the book as anonymous, knowing that the opening verse could mean the song was dedicated to Solomon or written about him. The opening passages are deeply passionate, with the beloved expressing that love is better than wine, praising her lover's fragrance, and declaring her desire to be drawn to him, rejoicing and celebrating their love. This aligns with the broader biblical view that God established marriage, including the physical union of husband and wife, which Israelite wisdom literature treasures as the appropriate expression of human sexuality. And so that's a brief overview of Song of Solomon. We'll get into examining the bridegroom. Examine the bridegroom. So in this instance, the bridegroom, which if you don't understand, bridegroom is just the broom, um, is Solomon. And I think that's an important thing that in the book that we are getting the most upfront parable about Jesus, who is the bridegroom, and his marriage to his bride, who is the church. The person that's being used for the bridegroom is Solomon. Now, that might be a hard thing for many of us to wrap our minds around, because we think when we think of Solomon, we think of like disobedient when it comes to marriage. But there's a lot to that, and there's a lot more. I'll say this: there is a closer nearness that Solomon has to Christ than many of us really understand. Besides the fact that this is revelation, we understand if you read Proverbs, if you read Proverbs, you read Ecclesiastes, and you read Song of Solomon, and knowing that Song of Solomon is a parable, you come to understand how much the level of revelation Solomon had that no one else had. That he was saying things plainly that no one else ever said plainly. Even his father said some things near to what he was saying in Proverbs, but it's not even close about and the direct and upfront, straightforward nature that he spoke about the will of God. But this is from Jesus' mouth, Matthew 6:20-29. It says, "And why are you worried about clothing? Observe how the lilies of the field grow. They do not toil, nor do they spin. Yet I say to you that not even Solomon in all his glory clothed himself like one of these." And so when Jesus talks about Solomon, he talks about him as gloriful. Not even Solomon in all his glory clothed himself like one of these. And there's not many people, if any people, that actually there are no people besides Solomon that we see even glory, this word glory being used as an adjective, that he was gloriful. Now we got to go into Solomon's love life, or his life as his marital life, to come to understand his nearness to Christ. And this is going to be hard to pull. I want you, but you gotta listen and understand. First Kings 11, we're going from verse 1 down to verse 4. Now King Solomon loved many foreign women, along with the daughter of Pharaoh, Moabite, Ammonite, Edomite, Sidonian, and Hittite women from the nations concerned, which the Lord has said to the sons of Israel, "You should not associate with them, nor shall they associate with you, for they will surely turn your heart away after their gods." Solomon held fast to these in love. He had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned his heart away. For when Solomon was old, his wives turned his heart away after other gods. And his heart was not wholly devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father had been. Okay. And so, what we see, the issue that, two issues. One, we understand that Solomon did marry foreign women, okay? Now, that was against what God's desires were for Israel. told him not to associate with certain people, certain types of Gentiles, people outside of Israel. And obviously, he married many, 700 wives, 300 concubines. That's 1,000 marriages that he had. Now, some people are gonna see this, and you're not gonna understand. You're gonna say, how is it possible that there's a relationship between Solomon? Why would Solomon be the parable for the bridegroom? How could that be in his marital life was the issue? Well, we understand that it was the product of his marital life that was the issue. Is that his heart was turned away from God because of the foreign women that he married who worshipped false gods and lived in false ways. Now, one of Jesus' most pivotal or most upfront parables about him and marriage and being a bridegroom comes from Matthew 25. We're going to read it real quick. Then the kingdom of heaven will be compared to 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were prudent. For when the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them, but the prudent took oil in flasks along with their lamps. Now, while the bridegroom was delaying, they all got drowsy and began to sleep. But at midnight there was a shout, "Behold, the bridegroom, come out to meet him." Then all those virgins rose and trimmed their lamps. The foolish said to the prudent, "Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out." But the prudent answered, "No, there will not be enough for us and you too. Go instead to the dealers and buy some for yourselves." And while they were going away to make the purchase, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the wedding feast, and the door was shut. Later the virgins also came, saying, "Lord, Lord, open up for us." But he answered, "Truly I say to you, I do not know you. Be on the alert then, for you do not know the day nor the hour." So this is a parable about the bridegroom, who is Christ, marrying 10 virgins, or 10 essentially fiancés who are preparing themselves to marry him, and he only accepts 5 and doesn't accept the others. Now, this is a complicated conversation because we have to understand that Jesus is married to us all. So, and the truth is, it's just as Solomon has 1,000 wives, Jesus has 1,000,000,000 wives. He has 1,000,000,000 wives. I don't know if you guys really understand that yet, but he is my husband. He's your husband. He's your friend who's a Christian's husband. He's your sister's who's a Christian husband. He's your mom who's a Christian's husband. He is all of our husband. That's the truth. So that is the first thing I'm going to address, of how he is more near to Solomon than you think. More near to Solomon than you think. The next thing I'm going to address is this. Now, in Ephesians, we're going to read about, and we already have read about, one of the most prominent passages about being the bride of Christ comes from Ephesians. Now, he's telling them they are the bride of Christ, gives them this instruction as being the bride of Christ, and he likens it to marriage and says, "Oh wait, all this instruction about marriage was really not about marriage in the flesh. It was about Christ and his bride, who is the church." But as he's giving this instruction and telling these Ephesians, these people in Ephesus, that they are the brides of Christ, or they are the bride of Christ in the unity, we have to understand who he was writing to. Ephesians 3, 1-3. This reason, I, Paul, the prisoner of Christ Jesus, for the sake of you Gentiles, if indeed you have heard of the stewardship. I'm sorry, let me go back and slow down. For this reason, I, Paul, the prisoner of Christ Jesus, for the sake of you Gentiles. Who is he talking to? He's talking to Gentiles. Now, you may not understand where I'm going with this yet. Solomon married, who did he marry? Gentiles. I'm trying to tell you that there is nothing in the Old Testament that is not a parable that's supposed to give you revelation about Christ. Solomon himself is a parable figure. Now, what he did turn his heart away from God, and we'll talk about that in a second. How why Jesus is different. Why is it that it was sin for Solomon to marry Gentiles, but it is not sin for Christ to marry Gentiles? So we've already addressed the nearness that Solomon has to Christ by one. Yes, they are both married to very many people. Okay, Solomon was married to 1,000, Jesus a billion. It almost reminds me of when they were cheering on for Saul and David and said that not Solomon, that Saul has killed his thousands and David tens of thousands. Well, you may hate to hear it, but Solomon's married 1,000 and Jesus married 1 billion. It's the truth. But the second thing we just revealed, understand, is that Solomon loved foreign women. A very great parable for Christ, who loves, he loves Gentiles. Read the Gospels. Many of the things in the Gospels are him dealing with Gentiles. Many of the things in the Gospel are him dealing with Gentiles. The woman that came about her daughter, the centurion, the you know actually ad nauseum. I can't even give you all the stories about his running with Gentiles, but he did so many things with and for Gentiles, and they did not understand in the Gospels why is he dealing with Gentiles so much? Because he's kind of like Solomon. He loves foreign brides. But in Ephesians, where he is writing to Gentiles, is the words we have the most prominent speech about being the brides of Christ. Now, once again, why is it sin for Solomon to marry? Not sin to marry, but why did it turn out to be sin for him to have a union with these people? And the answer to that is because it turned his heart away from God. But we understand that Christ is the opposite. His heart cannot be turned from God. That's why one of the best statements in the New Testament, which goes to this conversation, is that even when we are faithless, He remains faithful. We cannot change Him. It doesn't matter how faithless we are, much idol worshipers we are, false god lovers. It does not matter. You're not changing Christ. You're not going to change Him. Which leaves there's only one option of something to change, and it is us. So that is where Christ does not fall into sin. He can't fall into sin. He's been tempted in all things. We cannot tempt him to sin. We can't change him, but Solomon was able to be changed. Now we go to Romans 2 because we understand this is that and what he gives as a pledge, almost just like a man in our day and age. This hasn't always been this way, but when a man marries a woman, he offers her an engagement ring. Well, the Spirit is like an engagement ring for Christ. But this engagement ring turns a Gentile into a Jew in spirit. Romans 2:20-29 says, "For he is not a Jew who is one outwardly, nor is circumcision that which is outward in the flesh. But he is a Jew who is one inwardly, and circumcision is that which is of the heart, by the Spirit, not by the letter, and his praise is not from men, but from God." Circumcision is that which is of the heart, by the Spirit. So when he asks us to marry him, and we say yes, and we get dipped in the water. He gives his Spirit. And his Spirit begins to what? Circumcise our hearts. And we become a Jew inwardly. So no longer is this law breaking marriage, which interesting enough, the oil in that parable, oil is a parable for the Spirit as well, Spirit of the Lord. But when we receive the Spirit, we are no longer we're circumcised of heart, so that's taking away the flesh. We're no longer these idol worshiping false god loving false way walking people, we become the those that are that walk in the obedience of faith, and we're cleansed by faith. So where Solomon and Jesus, this is where Solomon's near, but he's not Christ. Why? Because he's changeable. Christ is not changeable. He's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And he changes those he comes in contact with. Where Solomon was changed by his relationships. We'll read from John 17, verse 6 down to 11. Then we'll skip down the chapter and read something else together. So, John 17, 6, starting at 6, it says, I have manifested your name to the men who you have gave me out of the world. They were yours, and you gave them to me, and they have kept your word. And they have come to know that everything you have given me is from you. For the words which you gave me, I have given to them, and they received them and truly understand that I came forth from you, and they believe that you sent me. I ask on their behalf. I do not ask on behalf of the world, but of those whom you have given me. Sorry, for they are yours, and all things that are mine are yours, and yours are mine. I have been glorified in them. I am no longer in the world, and yet they themselves are in the world. And I come to you, Holy Father, keep them in your name, the name which you have given me, that they may be one, even as we are one. So now this also is where, in a spiritual aspect, to be honest with you, like in the flesh, things can be very simple by the sight. And you say, oh, this is monogamous or this is polygamous. Well, things are different in the spirit. Because we see at the end of this that his desire is that we are one, just as he is one. Now, this is why we are not known as the brides of Christ with an S. We're known as the bride of Christ through unity because we are one. Billions of beings made into one being. Billions of beings made into one being. Well, I would also say that's also how they're near but not the same. Why? Because all of Solomon's wives were divided. They're all from these different Gentile nations, different ways, different gods, whatever they are, and they're not one. They're not a unity. They're not a cod. So although Jesus marries a billion of us, because of the union and a kindness through faith and love, which we'll talk about, he's only got one bride. Where Solomon actually did have 1,000 brides. We'll get into how those things are possible in a second through the lens of God. Now we're going to scroll down here where it says in John 17, 22 to 23, it says, the glory which you've given me, I have given to them, that they may be one, just as we are one. I am them and you and me, that they may be perfected in unity, so the world may know that you sent me and loved them, even as you have loved me. So we are to be perfected in unity, and we are to be one, just as He is one. Now, unity. In this prayer, he says we were perfected in unity. Now we talk about how are we made into a unity is the question. Colossians 3:14 says, beyond all these things, put on love, which is the perfect bond of unity. So it is through love that we are one. So we understand that when he commands us to love each other, which he was talking to his disciples, his followers, to love each other, he's saying, listen, I don't want a billion wives. I want one wife. And if you guys love each other, you are one. You are my one perfect wife. Which goes back over to Old Testament, 1 Samuel 18:1. Now it came about when he had finished speaking to Saul, that the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as himself. So, through this love of him through himself, it says their souls were knit together. That's a spiritual unity that Christ desires of us. Our souls, which are the things that are going to live on beyond this flesh and will be incorporated to being this one bride of Christ. It is through loving each other as ourselves. which is why we see they understood in Acts why they were giving each other as much money as each other needed. They made all their money into one. They made everything they had into one because they really believed in being a unified bride of Christ. That is a lost thing in translation today. It is a very hard thing to find. If you believe it, you're weird, and I know that I'm very weird because I believe it. I really believe in it. I really do. I'm sorry. I'm not a pretender in the faith. I actually believe it. And I also believe that anyone that hates or lives with unforgiveness under those things has been excluded from being a bride of Christ because either you're in and you love everyone in it that's here to serve him and love him, be his wife, or you're not a part of the union. You're not part of the cod. You're a dead cell. Now I want to go into this Ephesians 5 rhetoric. This Ephesians 5 rhetoric. Where it says, husbands, love your wives just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself up for her, so that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, that he might present to himself the church in all her glory, having no spot or wrinkle or any such thing. So, once again, we have to understand that the difference is this: the preparation. Solomon did not require this washing, this cleanliness from his wives to be joined to him. Where Christ does it by through himself, the Spirit of Christ cleanses, which we call the Holy Spirit, or the Spirit cleanses, washes with the water and the word, and prepares us to be His bride. I mean, he loves Gentiles, but he's not marrying Gentiles. He's marrying a transformed being. But that she'll be holy and blameless. So husbands ought also to love their own wives, their own bodies. He who loves his own wife loves himself, for no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ also does the church. Because we're members of his body. Listen, we are members of his body. We are one, his body. We are members of his body. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and shall be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This mystery is great, but I am speaking with reference to Christ and the church. Nevertheless, each individual among you also is to love his own wife even as himself, and the wife must see to it that she respects her husband. She respects her husband. Now, I want to give you this because this understanding is that, like I said, his relation to Solomon, they are both they are both Gentile lovers. They really are. But like I said, Solomon loved them in their sin. Christ does not. He loves us coming out of our sin. He loves the potential of us without our sin, not with it. He wants it off. Revelation 21, 25, 27 says, in the daytime, for there will be no night there, its gates will never be closed, and they will bring the glory and the honor of the nations into it, and nothing unclean, and no one who practices abomination and lying shall ever come into it, but only those whose names are written in the Lamb's book of life. So we're talking about the holy city. We're talking about Jerusalem, which is the bride. He's saying, listen, there will be there will be no practice of abomination in her. There'll be no lying in her. There'll be nothing unclean in her. And you understand, these are all the things that Solomon's wives that lived in Solomon, and Solomon's wives. I'm sorry, that lived in Solomon's wives. And no one who does these things was written in the Lamb's book of life. You are not written down as a bride of Christ, as a wife of His, if you still practice these things. If you have disregarded the washing of these things off of you, which we all have them. We all have had them. That's why it says in the Bible, if anyone claims they're without sin, they're a liar. That we have all had these things, but they are to be washed of us to come into and be a part of the bride of Christ. Last thing, because it's just it all comes together here. Still talking about the washing of the wife. Blessed are those who wash their robes. Blessed are the wives that wash their robes. You're washed, so they may have the right to the tree of life and may enter into by the gates into the city. The reality is that even if we are engaged, we will not be married if we're not accepting the stripping down of the abominations, the idols, the lying, the the uncleanliness. We have to be washed to enter in and be a part of the company that is the bride of Christ. Now, I won't take too long going through this because you're going to read this for yourself, and obviously, you're not obviously, but hopefully by now you understand that we're going to do a rainbow reading assignment for every book from here on out. So I'm not going to get too deep into these parables because they're for you to study for yourself. But I want to read it because I want you to also see this: the perfectness of the parables that he is using. All these concepts that are in your textbooks are what are being used from the bridegroom's perspective as he is describing the bride. And this also is a great showing of Christ's love for the church. Not also, it is. That is exactly what it is. So, what would you say? Physical beauty, the general things, fairest among women, all beautiful with no blemish. Beautiful as Tirzah, lovely as Jerusalem, awesome as an army with banners. The only one unique, her mother's choice one. Her the face and eyes like doves, eyes like pools in Heshbon by the gate of Beth Rabim. Cheeks have like halves of a pomegranate behind her veil. Hair like a flock of goats descending from Mount Gilead. Head crowns her like caramel. Hair like purple threads. You hear all these great parables that you should be acquainted with through your textbooks. Teeth like a flock of newly shorn ewes, which are sheep, all bearing twins, none bereaved. Lips and mouth, lips like a scarlet thread, mouth lovely. Lips drip honey and milk under her tongue. Pile like the best of wine. The neck like the Tower of David, built with rows of stone with 1,000 shields hanging on it. Neck like a tower of ivory. Her breast, the two breasts like twin fawns of a gazelle which feed among the lilies. Breasts like clusters of the vine. Body stature like a palm tree, navel like a round goblet which never lacks mixed wine, belly like a heap of wheat fenced about with lilies, nose like the tower of Lebanon facing Damascus, beautiful feet in sandals, curves of thighs like jewels, work of the hands of an artist. Fragrance of her oils and perfumes better than all spices, garments fragrant with myrrh, aloes, and cassia, her her breath like apples. Comparisons like a mare among Pharaoh's chariots, like a lily among thorns, like a garden locked, a spring sealed, a garden spring well of fresh water streams from Lebanon, dawn, like the dawn, moon, and sun. Character and personality, dark but lovely, has ravished the bridegroom's heart, a sister, a bride, one who seeks and loves. That's lesson 12. The bridegroom will be back with our last lesson in hidden manna called the bride. Be blessed.